Sometimes the best decisions feel like the worst ones in the moment. I'm 32, and 3 weeks ago, I sent what I thought was the smartest text message of my life. Now I'm sitting in my childhood bedroom wondering how everything went sideways so fast. Let me back up. Mark and I had been married for 12 years, and I was suffocating. He was one of those guys who remembered every anniversary, who did the dishes without being asked, who apologized first after every argument, even when he wasn't wrong. Most women would kill for that, right? Wrong. It was exhausting being married to someone so predictable. I met Mitch at this work conference 6 months ago. He was everything Mark wasn't: spontaneous, exciting, dangerous in that good way that makes your heart race. We started texting, then meeting for coffee, then, well, you know how these things go. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The morning I sent the text, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. I'd been planning it for weeks, slowly moving my important stuff to Mitch's place whenever Mark was at work. I told him I was organizing or donating clothes to charity. He believed every word because that's the kind of trusting fool he was. I typed it out during my lunch break. I'm leaving you for someone who actually loves me. Don't try to stop me. Send. The relief was instant. No more pretending, no more fake smiles, no more boring conversations about quarterly reports and weekend plans. I was free. His response came 20 minutes later. Safe travels. That's it. 2 words. No begging, no questions, no emotional breakdown. Just safe travels, like I was going on vacation instead of ending our marriage. It pissed me off more than I expected. Where was the fight? Where was the desperation? I'd given him 12 years, and he couldn't even be bothered to call. I brushed it off. He was probably in shock. Men like Mark don't handle rejection well. He'd come crawling back within a week, guaranteed. That night, Mitch and I celebrated at this fancy restaurant downtown. I posted a subtle Instagram story, champagne glass, candlelight, caption about new beginnings. The likes poured in from friends who had no idea what was really happening. It felt perfect, but Mark still didn't call. Not that night, not the next day. Radio silence. By Friday, I was getting annoyed. I decided to go back to the house and get more of my things, maybe force a conversation. When I pulled into the driveway, something felt different. The spare key wasn't under the flower pot where we'd kept it for years. I used my regular key, but it wouldn't turn. He'd changed the locks on our house without even telling me. My hands were shaking as I pounded on the door. "Mark, I know you're in there. We need to talk about this like adults." Nothing. His car wasn't even in the driveway. I found the note tucked under the windshield wiper of my car. Professional letterhead, some law firm I'd never heard of. All communication regarding the dissolution of your marriage should be directed to Peterson and Associates. Peterson and Associates? He'd hired a lawyer already. I drove straight to Mitch's apartment, my mind racing. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Mark was supposed to be heartbroken, not strategic. He was supposed to beg me to reconsider, not lawyer up like some corporate shark. "Babe, you look stressed," Mitch said when I burst through his door. He was playing video games on his couch, still in the same clothes from yesterday. Mark changed the locks and hired a lawyer. Mitch paused his game. Damn, that's intense. Want a beer? That's when I noticed how small his apartment really was. 1 bedroom, barely any furniture, dishes piled in the sink. For 6 months, it had felt cozy and romantic when we were sneaking around. Now it just felt cramped. "I tried to use our credit card at lunch today," I said. "It was declined." "Probably just a glitch." "No, Mitch, I called the bank." Mark moved all our money to his personal account. He finally looked up from his game. All of it. Every penny. The silence stretched between us. I could practically see the wheels turning in his head, calculating what this meant for our future together. "Look, babe, maybe you should call him. Work something out. This legal stuff is getting complicated." Complicated? Like I was some problem he needed to solve, instead of the woman he'd been telling he loved for months. That weekend, I tried calling Mark directly, straight to voicemail every time. I drove past our house, my house too, legally, and saw him through the kitchen window making coffee like nothing had changed. When he spotted my car, he closed the blinds. The mature thing would have been to respect his space and work through lawyers, but maturity had never been my strong suit. I waited until Monday, when I knew he'd be at work, then showed up at his office building. The receptionist knew me. I'd been there for Christmas parties and company picnics for years. "Oh, hi, Isla. Mark's in a meeting right now, but I can let him know you're here." "Actually, I'll just wait by his office, surprise him." She looked uncomfortable, but didn't stop me. I sat in the chair outside his door for 2 hours, watching his coworkers whisper and avoid eye contact. When Mark finally appeared, he wasn't alone. Some guy in a suit I didn't recognize. "Ayla." His voice was flat, professional, like I was a client instead of his wife. "We need to talk." "No, we don't. Everything goes through Peterson now. I'm still your wife. You're my soon-to-be ex-wife who announced she was leaving me for another man. There's a difference." The guy in the suit cleared his throat. "Mark, we should get going. The client's waiting." Mark nodded and started walking away. Actually walking away from me, in public, in front of his colleagues. "You can't just shut me out like this," I called after him. He turned around and for a split second I saw something flicker in his eyes, but then it was gone. "You shut yourself out the moment you sent that text." That night, I got a call from Harper, my best friend since college. At least I thought she was my best friend. "Ayla, what the hell is going on? Mark's posting on Facebook about new chapters and grateful for true friends. People are asking questions." "I left him for someone better." "You left him? Jesus, Ayla, how? Why?" "I wasn't happy. I haven't been happy for years. I found someone who actually appreciates me." "Who?" "His name is Mitch. We met at that conference in March." Long pause. "You've been cheating on Mark since March?" "I wouldn't call it cheating. I call it finding myself." Another pause, longer this time. "Ayla, Mark is one of the good ones. Everyone knows that. What you did, people aren't going to understand." "People don't need to understand. It's my life." "And Mitch? Is he worth destroying your marriage over?" I looked around Mitch's apartment. He was in the bedroom talking loudly on the phone with someone about overdue rent. The sink was still full of dishes from 3 days ago. Yes, I lied. He's worth everything. But even as I said it, doubt was creeping in. The past week at Mitch's place had been different. The excitement of sneaking around was gone, replaced by the reality of actually living together. He was messy, unemployed half the time, and constantly stressed about money. The passionate conversations we'd had during our affair had turned into him complaining about his ex-wife, his job prospects, his landlord. Still, going back to Mark wasn't an option. I'd burned that bridge with napalm. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday, hand-delivered by some professional-looking woman who made me sign for them like they were a package from Amazon. Reading through the legalese, one thing became crystal clear. I was screwed. The house was solely in Mark's name, so was the mortgage. When we bought it 8 years ago, his credit was perfect and mine was less perfect. The bank had required only his signature on everything. At the time, I'd been relieved not to deal with the paperwork. Now I was paying for that laziness. The cars, the furniture, even the damn wedding china his mother had given us, technically his since he'd made all the payments. My lawyer, some bargain basement guy I'd found online, was brutally honest during our consultation. "Mrs. Patterson, I'll be frank with you. Your text message and social media posts make this case nearly impossible to win. You voluntarily abandoned the marriage for another man and documented it publicly. In this state, that affects asset division significantly." "But I was his wife for 12 years. That has to count for something." "It does. You're entitled to your personal belongings and half of any assets acquired during the marriage that you can prove you contributed to financially." "How much are we talking?" He did some quick math on his calculator. "Roughly $3,000 and your Honda Civic." $3,000? 12 years of marriage reduced to what some people spend on a vacation. That's when the panic really set in. I quit my job 2 weeks before sending the text, thinking I'd have time to figure things out with Mitch. My bank account had maybe $800 in it. Mitch's financial situation was worse than I'd realized. He was 3 months behind on rent and his credit cards were maxed out. "Babe," he said that night, "maybe you should try to work something out with Mark. This divorce stuff is getting expensive and I'm not sure I can handle the stress right now." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we rushed into this. Maybe you should have talked to him first, tried counseling or something." I stared at him. This was the man I'd thrown away my entire life for, the man who'd whispered that he loved me more than Mark ever could. Now he was suggesting I crawl back to my husband like a dog with its tail between its legs? "You're having second thoughts." "I'm being realistic. You're about to lose everything, and I can't support both of us on my income." "What income? You've been unemployed for 2 months." His face hardened. "Don't start with that. You knew my situation when we got together." "I knew you were between jobs, not that you were a professional mooch." The fight that followed was ugly. He called me a selfish person who destroyed her own life and expected him to fix it. I called him a loser who couldn't keep a job or pay his rent. We both said things that couldn't be taken back. I ended up sleeping on his couch that night, staring at the ceiling and wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. The next morning, Mitch was gone. Just gone. His clothes, his gaming console, even his toothbrush. The only thing he left was a note on the kitchen counter. "This isn't working. I need space. Don't contact me." Space to think. The coward couldn't even break up with me properly. I was alone in his apartment. Well, technically the landlord's apartment since Mitch was being evicted. With nowhere to go and no money to get there, I called my mother, swallowing what was left of my pride. "Ela, sweetheart, what's wrong? You sound terrible." "Mom, I need to come home for a while." "Come home? What about Mark? What about your house?" "Mark and I are getting divorced." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. "Divorced? Ela, what happened? You two seemed so happy at Christmas." "We grew apart. It happens." "Grew apart? After 12 years, you just grew apart?" I couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. "It's complicated, Mom." "Well, of course you can come home. Your room's still here. But, Ela, are you sure about this? Mark's a good man. Maybe you two could try counseling." Everyone kept saying that. Mark's a good man. Like I was some kind of fool for not appreciating him. Like being a good man was enough to keep a marriage together when there was no passion, no excitement, no spark left. But sitting in that empty apartment surrounded by Mitch's abandoned mess, I was starting to wonder if maybe being a good man was enough. Maybe I'd been the fool all along. I packed my things into garbage bags, how's that for dignity, and drove the 3 hours to my parents' house. The same house I'd grown up in, with my faded boy band posters still on the bedroom walls and my high school trophies gathering dust on the shelves. My father barely looked at me when I walked in. He'd always loved Mark, treated him like the son he'd never had. Golf buddies, fishing trips, long conversations about sports and politics. I could tell from his cold shoulder that he'd already heard the story, probably from Mark himself. "Your mother's making up the guest room," he said without looking away from his newspaper. "I assume this is temporary." "I don't know yet, Dad. The divorce isn't final." "Divorce?" He said it like a curse word. 32 years old and you're running home to Mommy because you couldn't make your marriage work? It's not that simple, isn't it? You had a good man who loved you, a nice house, a stable life. What more did you want? That was the question, wasn't it? What more did I want? I wanted to feel alive. I wanted passion and excitement and spontaneity. I wanted someone who looked at me like I was the most interesting person in the world, not just a comfortable habit. But sitting in my childhood bedroom, scrolling through Mark's Facebook page and seeing him actually smiling in his recent photos, I was starting to think maybe I'd confused excitement with chaos, passion with drama. 3 months later, the divorce was final. I got exactly what my lawyer had predicted: $3,000, my car, and my personal belongings. Mark got everything else, including the house where we'd planned to raise children, the furniture we'd picked out together, and apparently the respect of everyone we known as a couple. I was working part-time at a retail store in town, living with my parents, and spending my evenings stalking Mark's social media like some pathetic teenager. He looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way I couldn't remember him being during our marriage. He'd started going to the gym, updated his wardrobe, was posting photos with friends I didn't recognize. It was like he'd become a completely different person the moment I left. The worst part? He was dating someone, a nurse he'd met at some charity event his company had sponsored. She was pretty in that natural, comfortable way that I'd never been able to pull off. No heavy makeup, no designer clothes, just genuine. The kind of woman who probably packed lunches for her boyfriend and remembered to water plants. I found myself comparing every aspect of her online presence to mine. She posted pictures of hiking trails and homemade dinners. I posted selfies and complaints about my retail job. She had friends who left genuine, supportive comments. My posts got pity likes from acquaintances who were probably just being polite. 6 months after the divorce, I saw the engagement announcement. They looked ridiculously happy in the photos. Mark was wearing a suit I didn't recognize, looking more confident and relaxed than I'd ever seen him. She was laughing at something he'd said, her ring catching the light. The caption was simple. She said, "Yes, can't wait to spend forever with my best friend." My best friend. In 12 years of marriage, I'd never once thought of Mark as my best friend. He was my husband, my roommate, my financial partner, but my best friend? That required actually liking someone, not just tolerating them. I threw my phone across the room and cried for 3 hours straight. Not because I wanted Mark back, that ship had sailed and sunk, but because seeing him so genuinely happy made me realize how miserable we'd both been during our marriage, how miserable I'd made us both. The truth was, I'd never loved Mark the way he deserved to be loved. I'd loved the security he provided, the status of being married, the comfort of not having to figure out my life alone. But I'd never loved him for who he was. And now, he'd found someone who did. 2 years later, I was still living with my parents, still working retail, still scrolling through social media posts of the life I'd thrown away. Mark and his wife had bought a house together, not the house we'd shared, but a new one they'd chosen together. They traveled, they posted photos of dinner parties with friends, they looked like adults who had their act together. I, on the other hand, was 34 years old and asking my mother for gas money. The final blow came when I saw the pregnancy announcement. Mark's wife, glowing and beautiful, with his hands on her growing belly. The caption, "Our greatest adventure begins in October." I'd wanted children with Mark once, early in our marriage, but I'd kept putting it off, waiting for the right time, waiting to feel more settled, waiting for something I couldn't even name. Now, he was having that family with someone else, someone who'd appreciated what she had instead of constantly wanting more. I closed the laptop and stared at my reflection in the black screen. Tired eyes, stress lines I hadn't had 2 years ago, the look of someone who'd made all the wrong choices and was just now understanding the consequences. The worst part wasn't losing Mark. I'd never really had him, not in the way that mattered. The worst part was realizing that I'd destroyed a good thing because I'd been too selfish and immature to recognize its value. I'd wanted excitement and passion and spontaneity. What I'd gotten was chaos, drama, and regret. Mark had been right to protect himself, right to move on, right to find someone who would love him properly. I just wished I'd figured out how to be that person before it was too late. But sitting in my childhood bedroom at 34, watching the man I'd thrown away build a beautiful life with someone else, I finally understood the difference between wanting someone and loving them. I'd wanted Mark for what he could give me. She loved him who he was. And that, more than any divorce decree or custody arrangement, was why I'd lost everything and she gained the world.
If this confession kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We share powerful true stories every day that explore the complex realities of life.